Okay, hello and welcome. I'm Jason Gumpert from msdynamicsworld.com, and we are here for a new session in our Fall 2014 CRM webcast series. Today's event is a little unique. It's a panel discussion on top challenges of integrating with Dynamics CRM Online. We are joined by a couple of folks who know all about that topic. Our panelists today are Alex Fagundes, CIO of PowerObjects, CRM consultant Sandor Schellenberg, who will be joining us shortly as he gets through some technical issues. But also we have Pierre Hulsebus from Scribe Software. He is a senior sales engineer. Scribe is also a sponsor of our CRM webcast series. And so I know that the panel wants to make this a very interactive session today, not only to share their own knowledge and experiences, but to hear from you with your questions, your experiences, your feedback on the topic of integrating with Dynamics CRM Online. You can share with us through the WebEx panel that you're in right now. You can use either the chat or the Q&A blocks that you should see to the left. To the right of the slides. And chat is great for sharing a comment or sharing a piece of information. And Q&A is best used if you have a question that you want our panelists to answer. So without further delay, Pierre, why don't I hand it off to you to get things started?
Thanks, Jason. My name is Pierre Hulsebus. I work for Scribe Software. I'm a senior sales engineer. My background is in the Dynamics CRM space, though. So I ran a CRM consultancy for many years and have been in the Microsoft Dynamics CRM space since the very beginning of Microsoft CRM doing integrations. So I'll be one of the folks today. And Alex, you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Alex Fagundes with PowerObjects. I've been at PowerObjects for 9 years. I've also been using Scribe for the past 9 years. I actually started back in the good old CRM 3.0 days. So quite a while. And kind of my niche are large systems and integrations. Pretty much architecting anything related to CRM. And I'll be one of the panelists also.
Excellent. I will also, I'll introduce him because he's run a little late this morning or this afternoon. He's over in the Netherlands today. That's why, so he's trying to get on the call. But Sandor Schellenberg, he's a Scribe MVP. He's also in the Microsoft Dynamics space and certainly does a great deal with Microsoft CRM and CRM Online. So. Well, kind of to kick off our conversation today, what we really wanted to focus on is, CRM Online specifically, and what are some of the challenges of integrating with Dynamics CRM. And the folks that make the decisions of whether to go on-premise with an integration or online, it's one of the reasons why Microsoft Dynamics is chosen over many of the competitors, because they give you an option nowadays. And so because of that, we have some very large enterprise customers, banking industries or whatnot that are in that need to have highly secured networks, stuff behind firewalls, air-gapped networks, those types of things. And they choose to often to run a CRM on-premise, and for many years, that has been the largest amount of customers have been using the CRM on-premise with Microsoft Dynamics, and it's a fantastic solution. And because it's on-premise, it gives you this rich access to all the data. Everything is in your system, all of the web services and the asynchronous services, the database, all of that information sits inside of your environment. So you have access and control over everything in the environment. And IT people love, control, right? We just love to have that all in control. But one of the newer, obviously, things today that's happening is we're seeing a large adoption with CRM Online for lots of different reasons. One is that infrastructure, right? So that infrastructure comes at a cost to maintain and manage and keep up to date. And so folks can turn to Microsoft and run this fantastic solution, program it and develop in it, but not have to worry about hosting the infrastructure for that solution. And that for not only the very small companies, but also for the very large companies, this has tremendous advantage of physical diversity, a high degree of security that can be afforded by having these systems sitting in data centers around the world, the scalability that comes with that, is tremendous. And so just in the last few years, we've been seeing not only just more customers on CRM Online, but more enterprise kind of class customers, some very large organizations, and you'd be surprised that some of the companies that are moving this stuff up to the cloud. And so it's a very exciting time to be involved with this platform. Obviously, though, there comes with all of these choices challenges. And so we wanted to talk today about what we as a group had thought about constant or consistent challenges that we deal with on an ongoing basis, really kind of on a daily basis. So let's talk about those today. And again, if you guys have any comments or additional questions through this, please feel free to add that, and we'll monitor that as we go along today. So the first one is because we don't have access to the SQL database, one of the big cool things that folks are doing today is they're making investments in reporting and data warehousing. And when you have the data in your building or in your data center, that makes it easy to replicate the data off into data warehouses, or to build SQL reporting services that go right against the SQL data that join off into other things. And without that method available to us anymore, we now have to access the CRM data through a system called Fetch XML, which is a proprietary Microsoft method. And there are some challenges with that. Now, some of these features, I haven't looked at this in a couple of weeks since I put this slide together, so I don't know if they've made some improvements in 2015 with this, but a few things stick out as being challenges when approaching building a SQL reporting services report against a Fetch XML data source. A couple of pretty standard things can stick out right away. The right outer join and full outer joins are not supported, and the primary reason for that is because the maximum amount of data that you can kind of nab in one kind of fetch is about 50,000 records, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're, let's say, joining out to activity tables, that's a challenge because it's easily to handle, emails and activities that are in excess of 50,000. I probably have 50,000 emails in my inbox. I don't know about you, Alex, but I have a lot of them.
Yep.
So because of that puts a big, kind of elephant in the room, like how am I going to do this? Because it's not like I just go, oh, okay, I'm never going to do right outer joins to activity tables. In fact, that's one of the reasons I want to look at my activity data. I want to find out, how many outbound phone calls am I doing in a particular time slot, and you have all of that's what this is all about, right? All getting at all these certain kind of data points, and so. So that's a big challenge. The other thing that goes along with that, so those are some, I would just say, some of the major challenges with dealing with Fetch XML. I don't know about you, Alex, about, some of the challenges that you've had and some of the ways that you guys have gotten around it doing SQL reporting services. I don't know if you want to share some
exactly.
of your...
Very good points. Some of our clients, also come back to us that writing a report in SQL is pretty quick. A lot of folks know SQL. Fetch XML, it is something new to learn. So we, here, especially in a, large environment where we may already have 2 or 3 folks writing reports with SSRS, SQL's kind of, embedded in a culture. So we hear that as a pretty big reason to have this, shadow database or, a data warehouse database. And then a second reason is truly to have a separate database to report on. We have a lot of medium-sized clients, a lot of large clients that already have a data warehouse that want to intermingle CRM data in their existing data warehouse. And I'd say probably a little bit over half the time, this is the reason why we bring forward Scribe. So yep, we can do that. We can copy the data from CRM Online to your local data warehouse database, whether it's SQL Server or Oracle.
Yeah, so there, with Scribe, we've got really 2 different ways that we can do that. We can, one, use what we call Scribe replication services, and that basically we point at the application and it builds a copy of the CRM database into basically a shadow database running locally, and it will query CRM every so many minutes. You can set it up on how often you want it to query, and it will just copy all of those records into what is equivalent in the CRM system internal database as the SQL views that would be provided. So you'll have a table for accounts or a table for email activities, those types of things. And so Scribe will do that. If folks are using Insight, which is kind of our on-premise application, they can basically build that themselves also, build the database and just kind of point to CRM and copy the data into a local data warehouse and a local data store for that key information in the system. So that is a common method. Also, folks, as Alex was saying, can also just target existing data warehouses that have already been done. And with this method, a lot of challenges come up actually relative to things like timestamping. And that's a good example where you've got a data warehouse. I worked on a project last year to kind of bake your noodle, so to speak, and really put your head in a twister, thinking about I'm pulling data out of CRM, but I have users in all different time zones. And the question that the data warehouse was trying to answer was, how many outbound phone calls are my users making between the hours of 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock in the morning? Now, how many in the morning, how many calls are these people making? And, so a tool to just replicate the data isn't enough. You have to really manipulate the data on the way through because the users are all in different time zones. The users, some people were in Europe and some people were in the United States, and we had multiple CRM systems and the servers were in different time zones. And so we had to reconcile what was 8 o'clock locally for each one of the users. And that was quite a task to do, but we were able to do it using Scribe Insight because we could look up the users. We could see, as part of the metadata of the users, what time zone they're in, each one of the users' time zone. And CRM internally stores it in UTC, so you have to offset, that time to convert it to, 8 o'clock to find out what that person's UTC version of 8 o'clock was. So those are some of the challenges that you have when you're replicating the data warehouse to something locally, because you're dealing with time zone issues too. So Scribe's got some cool time zone things that we can do.
Well, actually, looks like we have a question from the audience, Matthias, related to the data model. So if the data model in CRM Online changes, how will we be sure that the local database also gets the new schema changes? So great question. And kind of answering that question in relation to Scribe's two products. If we're using Scribe Insight, so the Scribe, the on-premises edition, the one has been around for quite a while, in that scenario, we manually have to upkeep and make the changes in the local data, in our local data warehouse. So if the schema CRM Online changes and we want to replicate these additional tables or fields, we have to manually modify the on-premises database. Now with Scribe Online, with the replication product, that is automated. So it is specifically made for getting your CRM Online data, whether it's the whole database or an entity-by-entity level, to an on-premises database. And then if the schema changes, it is modified in our on-premises database for us. So a lot of times when talking to our clients, if they want to replicate everything, we go with the replication product. If they only care about a couple entities and they have other needs for Scribes, we sometimes lean towards the Scribe on-premises.
Yep.
And Pierre, anything you want to add?
No, that's very true. A lot of times when we have this kind of conversation, that even the customers using the on-premise version of Insight will use replication services just for that one reason. Because in a small organization, let's say if it's just me and I'm the CRM manager and I'm managing the integrations, it's just another work step for me to go and extend that, shadow database with the additional tables or whatnot. But for an organization that has a little bigger IT staff, that typically is a change order inside of that organization. So somebody managing the SQL tables is different than somebody managing the CRM customizations. And so when you look at the cost internally of managing a simple change to a single table, the fact that the service just does it automatically typically justifies the cost of that thing. Because that's one of the benefits, huge, awesome benefits of CRM as an application platform, is that you can easily, add new fields to the schema, and that's happening all the time. People are making these changes all the time. So it'll just keep up.
We have a fairly high number, probably over a dozen customers that own both products, the Scribe application and the Scribe Insight on-premises, specifically for that reason, that it's pretty much pays for itself, having this automation and not having to worry about modifying the local schema.
Yeah, that's a big one. That's a big one.
Hey,
all right.
Hey, Pierre.
Yes.
So I think we have Sandor trying to get through on the line. I'm going to have to do a kind of a quick test here to make sure his audio starts working. So Sandor, if you can hear me and just sort of start saying hello, I'm going to sort of open up your line and make sure if I can hear you, I'll know you're there.
Hello, I'm here.
Hey.
Great.
Hey.
Hi.
It worked on the first try.
All right, Sandor. Thanks, man. Thanks for showing up. Excellent.
Yeah, it's a struggle at the office, so.
Excellent. So, well, let's move on to topic number 2, which was because we don't have access to the SQL database any longer to improve performance for integrations. What are some of the things that we can do to actually improve performance? So let me talk about this for a second and kind of cue this up as what the challenge is. So something as simple in an ERP integration with CRM is obviously when we're synchronizing something as simple as the account record in CRM. We've got our ERP customer that's sitting over in our ERP system, and there's a customer ID for that. And over in Dynamics CRM, somebody either exposes the account number field or adds a brand new custom field to CRM to expose that field to the system. So that becomes effectively in CRM what we call a foreign key. It's the ID for what is in the other system's database. And so all of the time that we're creating invoices or updating that customer record, we're looking at that ID number as the main seek operation to go and update the record, as opposed to creating a duplicate or inserting a new record. So if we create a sales order, let's say, comes over from the ERP system, or an invoice comes over, that has the customer ID number on it. And so we know we have to insert that sales order or invoice, and we need to have a parent record to that invoice. And that parent record, we need to find out what that ID is by that customer ID number. So by default in Dynamics CRM, that field is not indexed in CRM. As soon as I create a custom field to put my ERP customer ID, that field isn't indexed. And so what we'll find is if I've got 10 customers, not that big of a deal, but if I've got, let's say, 100,000 customers, that's a big deal. That is a costly operation inside of an integration to seek against CRM and say, here's my customer ID, go give me the unique identifier for that record. And so one of the tricks that we encourage our customers to do when you have an on-premise environment is to go and add an index to that column in the database. So once you do that, and it's fully supported by CRM to add a kind of a clustered or non-clustered index on that, and it will go faster. The integration now all of a sudden has an index it can use, and it is quick. And it will improve the integration performance dramatically improve it. But now, because we don't have access to SQL anymore, how do we solve this problem, or how do we deal with this issue? So, Alex, I don't know if you have some suggestions. I've put a couple up on the screen here, but I know there's some things that you guys are dealing with, because it's also not just an integration, but deals with custom code and some of the other things that where this becomes a problem.
Nope, exactly. And by having a local lookup as opposed to seeking in CRM Online, we're looking at not a difference of 10 times or 100 times, but literally you can literally get improvements of 1,000% faster, 10,000. We have had integrations that have grown over the years, where we're doing a seek for every lookup, and with a large batch may have taken 3 hours. By redoing things a little bit and leveraging Scribe to upkeep this local database for lookups, we literally have gone from 3 hours to being a 5-minute job, where we can then leverage a local lookup, a local SQL join. Now we do have to upkeep that one lookup table, but with items like users or lookup entities that don't change that often, that is a very quick item to do. So something we're seeing more and more of our medium, large-sized clients.
Sandler, I don't know if you had any insight into this this kind of challenge regarding lookup performance with online.
Yeah, with online, I was struck with the performance of the web service of CRM Online. So indeed, what already was suggested that look up in a SQL table, it is much faster, and for some static data, you could also use the file lookup with an .ini file, and that's even quicker. Of course, you need then an on-premise environment. So for on-premise, you could use the file lookup functionality. For CRM Online, you could use the Scribe internal database, or in some cases, if it's really static, some variables.
Excellent. Excellent. So yeah, that's the idea, or the concept of replicating the SQL structure in CRM, either to using that replication services, because that just basically makes a copy of the account record, and now in SQL locally, I have something that I can just either join into my query for data, or I can use in my integration files to look that data up through SQL. So because it's running locally, my agent would be running locally, it's going to be much, much faster. Now, one of the things you had talked about, Alex, or hinted at was, it goes to a question that we have about this, the replication service needs to have the latest data. Is it reasonable to think if somebody has 200 gigs of data, do you think they could actually have this on a daily basis? And so, yeah, so I don't know if you have some thoughts. I have some thoughts on it, but I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Sure, yeah. So good question. The answer is yes. We have a number of clients with very large CRM Online databases that are replicating on premises. A number of them actually replicate everything. A couple choose to skip some of the large items like attachments. Often some of the, if we have a large database, a large portion of that may be attachments, maybe workflow logs, things that we may not care about having in our local and replicated database. But the key thing is that once the data is replicated, at that point, we're only picking up the deltas, the changes. So the only thing that really matters is how much are we changing on a day-to-day basis, whether I have 200 gigs or half a terabyte. Do I have a lot of changes or a manageable amount? And we can also adjust. Do I replicate once a day, twice a day, once an hour? And I believe one of our clients actually goes down to every 15 minutes. So every 15 minutes, they're looking for changes in a couple key tables, replicating it down. And then what we often find is that the number of changes is not that high during the day or at night, as long as we don't have external systems updating the data. But it is a key item to take into consideration. How much is the system changing?
Yeah,
good question.
it's really true. One of the things we added in replication services early on was the ability, when I first did it, we took everything and copied it locally. And what you find is it's kind of like looking at zip files. There's a lot of data in there that is completely irrelevant to the actual replication of the data. A lot of the data inside of a CRM system has to do with security identifiers, auditing, like you mentioned, the workflow history, those kind of things. Now, we can replicate that data, and you can choose to do that. But when you think about it in the context of I'm using it for joins and data warehousing, do I need to know what the security identifiers are on shares? That's typically not relevant, and that takes up a huge amount of data. So you can turn that off. We actually have what we call recommended settings, and if you choose the recommended settings, what we skip are all of those kind of security identifiers and that kind of replicated information that just is irrelevant really to the integration. Important for an application to run, but you're not using that as the application's database. You're using it as a data store. So very true. And the other thing is the strategy that you had mentioned. And so when we think of integrating data, often we think of kind of time-based integrations. And back in the day we would run this every day or once a week. Well, it's kind of initially counterintuitive to people to think, I should be running this integration every so many minutes. It's a lot easier to and lower overhead on everything, not only the CRM side, but on the database target side, to replicate that data on an ongoing basis, throughout the day, through every minute or so, to just have it run a query. Do you have any new records for me? And then it's moving over the data effectively as the users type it in. So the data warehouse is concurrent within a couple minutes of what is online. And so yes, very, very true. Some of those good insight there, Alex. All right. One of the other things, and I was mentioning to Alex earlier, I sat through, if you had an opportunity in the CRM user group to sit through Alex's discussion on optimizing Dynamics CRM On-premise for an enterprise. One of the areas that a lot of folks that are in the know will use to improve the performance of both integrations and just ongoing usage, especially to scale the system up, is manipulating the threading options and the bulk kind of settings inside of Dynamics CRM's environment. And you have a lot of control over that, obviously, because everything's in the building. But with CRM on-premise, you don't have access to any of that kind of stuff. You can't change the thread count. You can't change some of those other little pieces and parts. And I just pulled this out of a little testing thing that I had done, this little table down here, and let me explain it to you. So Dynamics CRM has, we call it multi-threading, and Scribe can take advantage of multi-threading up to 64 threads at a time. So if I look at the row on the bottom down here, I'm able to, if I turn my threading all the way up and my bulk setting all the way up to 1,000 and my threads to 64, I'm getting in this environment about 600 records a second. If I turn the thread count though down to two threads, then and use the bulk setting at 250, I was able to get 1,900. So I tripled my my rows that I could process just by turning down my thread count. And so there's other strategies for this, but this is just to show you the effect that Microsoft is, and you probably have a lot more insight into how Microsoft does this, Alex, or what they're really doing on the back end to manage this process. But because you can't change this, you know, from a Scribe perspective, it's helpful to know the settings, and you can manipulate the settings appropriate for each environment that you're doing.
Yeah, no, very good point. And it's one of those items that the architecture then changes a little bit if we are running on-prem or running in CRM Online, where something that would be beneficial if we're on-prem can actually slow us down if we're now using CRM Online. And one of the trends we're seeing are folks that are picking up their CRM, migrating to CRM Online, and then suddenly their integrations are running 4 times slower. So in more than one occasion, we have seen this item be one of the fixes that they then had to tune down the number of threads that they were using.
Yep, the thread count inside of the workbench files, definitely.
Yep.
Sandor, I don't know if you have some insight into this also around threads and some of the tricks to manage threads.
I had one remark about the bulk in the bulk settings. So my experience is that the bulk inserts might get some unexpected errors, especially if you do a large amount in bulk. So I make sometimes a comparison using the same set of files used in bulk and the normal insert, and the insert seems to work more flawless than the bulk insert. So it's, in my experience, it looks that the CRM bulk import not is as steady as expected. So you might run into some issues with it. So I prefer also with data migration not to use the bulk insert feature of CRM. So I'm not sure if it's improved with CRM Online at the moment, but at least in my recent experience, it wasn't, a bit unreliable. And I still cannot explain it why it happened. So.
Yep, I know what people were finding. So on the kind of picking back what you just mentioned on the bulk operations, the max is 1,000. We have found that kind of the sweet spot is actually 900. Not a lot of, a little bit of science to it, but more of an art. But we're finding that once we set that at the max at 1,000, we do encounter some little issues, and then 900 appears to be that key number where we get the best performance, and it's rare for it to fail.
That's good input. I had in some of my testing seen in some of my recent testing I did this summer. There was a substantial difference once I went over 10, actually. So for one of my integration test beds, I set it to 10 instead of, once I got into 100 and over 100, I actually started encountering errors. But once I got into 10, then those bulk errors went away. So I don't know, Alex, you may have a little insight into, because there's not a lot of documentation on this about Microsoft CRM Online and what they're doing with throttling. Because I think this is really what's going on here. There's some sort of, like you say, it's a little more of an art than a science. It's like one day it has this kind of setting, but in another environment, it's a little different. And I think there's probably something going on. I don't know. I'm not under any, I don't know. Microsoft hasn't told me any secrets here, but I suspect there's some level of throttling that's happening, and something is sensing like, hey, you're just going to take over all the bandwidth, and this is multi-hosted, and so we need to be fair to other tenants on this environment. So this is kind of the way that they implement throttling. I don't know if that's what's going on here, but I'd love to hear what your opinion is.
Yeah, no, but we've actually found a couple things. So in the CRM 2011 days, we saw a lot more disparity or different behaviors, while in 2013 seems to be more evened out. But the one item we're finding is that CRM Online has a SQL Server database behind the scenes, just like on-premises. The indexes get either rebuilds or a reorg operation occurs at night, or at least at some point later. And what we have found, especially in large data loads, is that we may start loading the data with update/inserts. Things are humming along, and then they'll slow down. And often the cause of this slowdown are fragmented indexes. At some point, SQL Server is going to decide, hey, the index is really fragmented. I'm going back to a full table scan. Now, the fix is easy. Simply we wait. We wait for that nightly operation to occur. CRM Online is going to rebuild the indexes or perform the reorg, and then things are fast again. So it is something that we are more aware of when we do the large imports. Or if we can, we often start way ahead of time so that we simply do a delta. And once in a blue moon, we have seen these reindexing operations take longer than a day. We're not sure why or when, but once in a while, it does take sometimes 48 hours for it to occur.
Excellent.
Okay.
Yeah, excellent insight. Excellent insight. Yeah. At the end of the day, and this is always, as a CRM guy, when we start talking about clouds and whatnot, and we're all kind of technical folks, and so you always hear the salespeople kind of pitching CRM as and competitive platforms as it's really no software, it's just a subscription. But like you said, there's really servers in the background. There's really computers running this. It's not just magic that's happening. There's actually, like you said, a ginormous SQL server that's running these systems, and they run on servers sitting in data warehouses, and there's database administrators that have to manage it just like any other system. So that's very good insight. I have heard also relative to one of the points we had made earlier, that depending on the size of the customer, that during the onboarding process, Microsoft goes through a bit of an engineering exercise to make sure that the target servers and whatnot are at capacity for, let's say, a very large, let's say, a Fortune 500 company that's moving over to CRM Online. There's an engineering effort, and at times those we can interact with the people at Microsoft and discuss or open a case to say, hey, can you add an index to this, or can we look at, through support sometimes that we can help improve some of those reindexing jobs, or saying, hey, can we reindex this every day or something on this order, and that Microsoft typically is pretty open to those kind of, requests and changes for customers.
Yep, exactly. Yep. And the bigger you are, the more open they are.
Of course.
Indeed.
Of course. Let's go on here to our next. Oh, one of the other things that I just wanted to let everybody know I'm doing some testing on this, and we're writing a blog article here. Hopefully we'll have it done before the end of the year. One of the other things that we're going to try to do to see and I'll share the numbers with everybody, but Scribe Online has this thing we call agents, right? So when you're replicating data, it goes through, and actually our little piece of software that it goes through is called an agent. And the agent sits on a machine. So what would the impact be? I'm very curious to see what would the impact be if I took multiple agents and put them on different IP networks and was homing into CRM through different networks. So we're gonna give that one a whirl. What we tried multiple agents on the same machine, and we don't really get a great deal of performance. There's not a huge uplift with that. And again, we think it's because of throttling that may be going on, but we're going to try to see if we can get at it from different IP addresses, maybe see if that has an impact. So anyways, all right, so let's move on to the next one. So let's talk a little bit about latency, because that's has a big impact on lots of different things. And so latency, obviously, from my source system, when it's sitting on-premise in a hybrid integration to a target, that latency has a big impact on my user's experience, but also on my integration. That would be moving data back and forth. It's the error window often that we're dealing with. If the latency is too poor, it times out. The connections have to retry. CRM obviously is sensitive to latency, and there's performance indicators in the browsers and testing and all of this that goes into that. So I don't know if you guys, Alex and Sandor, want to talk about latency and how that presents a unique challenge with working with CRM Online.
Nope, yeah, and that's kind of usually a big topic of conversation for our global clients or our clients that have integrations coming from different data centers. We had another one that we're literally integrating systems in the U.S. with a CRM Online in the U.K. So latency is big. The nice thing about Azure is that depending on where your CRM Online is, you can actually spin up a VM in the same data center as CRM Online. So your latency can be way down. You're also going to get quite a bit higher bandwidth between your VM and the CRM Online. In our case, we actually have a couple VMs that are always in the small type, things like an A0 or A1. We keep a couple of those in the West Coast, a couple in the East Coast, and when we are working with a client, we bump them up to then A2, A3, so they have more CPU, more RAM. But these are VMs that we typically keep at all times, waiting for the next migration we have to do to CRM Online, or the next big data rearrange that we have to do again with CRM Online. It's one way of guaranteeing our stated latency and reducing.
That's excellent. One of the things that I had done was testing latency and kind of integration performance using both Azure and Amazon as a hosting, and there is a huge difference, as you mentioned, between those two, and we can reduce the latency quite a bit by just being in Azure. I had personally had a kind of an aha moment too when we started working with Azure, when I started working with Azure, for exactly what you were talking about, Alex, which is this whole concept of the scalability that Azure has. And so during migration projects, when I've got, millions and millions of records, and I need to move all of this data through the system, and during that initial time of an integration, I really need to have a lot of bandwidth available, not only for the data, but also, strong servers, Dynamics or Scribe, Insight. Let's say we were using Insight as our platform. We would want to have a lot of memory during that, so we can run concurrent workbench files, 20, 30 workbench files at the same time, and getting this huge amount of data through the pipe all at one time. But then once the data is moved over, then I'm just working with the deltas, and then I can scale back. I don't need all of that memory anymore. I don't need all that performance. And so you have this ability in Azure to spin up, a machine that would probably cost you $60,000 to buy a piece of hardware to match that performance, but I can basically rent that for a month. And so, yeah, I'm going to pay a couple $100 for the month, but after that, I can turn that thing down to a machine that's, got its 4 gigs of memory and 2 processors, and everything works just great. So I was just so excited about using Azure in that mode, like you had mentioned, to be able to kind of spin it up, get that huge amount of performance and speed when I need it, and then scale it back down later on when I'm just doing this ongoing performance. So it's pretty amazing.
Yep, and it's actually, we've had scenarios that we spun up a machine with a pretty high amount of RAM. I think it ended up being a D-class machine with 40-some gigs of RAM, only for a weekend. Only for, big process that had to be done on the weekend, and we're billed by the hour. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things, and I wanted to, this kind of fits in this box, and this is the folks that are familiar with Scribe. Scribe Insight runs workbench files where SQL is the source and CRM would be the target. Typically, we kind of chain those together or run them one after another. We're coming out with a new feature that will allow us to run those all in parallel and through the user interface. Now, you could always run them in parallel, but you needed to know a bunch of little scripting tricks and things on this order. We're just going to make it part of the user interface. So once you turn that feature on, you'll find that, oh, all of a sudden my server, I need more memory in my server. And so this will allow, when you're in that Azure environment, it's easy to kind of manage that kind of process to say, I just need a little more memory for this process. So it's amazing, actually. It's it's kind of a mind blower, I think, for folks like us that have been doing this for a long time to be able to, as a consultant, just be able to get the machine that you need right now without having to go through a big acquisition process. And then when we're done, we go back down. So it's just part of the budget of the project, and I don't need to go through this entire acquisition process to get a large server. Like, oh man, I could really use this, you know, for, like you say, that weekend, or this cutover process. And then after that, you know, I can just afford it in the budget when it's less expensive. So.
Yep, and it's all point and click.
Yeah, it's amazing. It really is amazing. It's. Sandor, I don't know if you've had a
couple questions.
Oh, sure.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask Sandor how his. I was going to ask Sandor how his experience with Azure has been, because he's over in Europe, and I just wondered, Sandor, if you had any thoughts.
Yeah, in Europe, at least in my experience, that we're not cloud-minded as across the ocean. So we have similar scenarios, only we use still a lot of Scribe Insight, and we actually use the same scenarios with VMware. So we, especially in enterprise, you don't use any physical servers anymore. Everything is virtual. So in the beginning, especially with the first data runs, we can increase the VMware also to increase memory and internal processors, and later we can scale it down. So that's basically a similar situation. And I'm currently working on a hybrid integration, and in fact, the latency is not a big issue at the moment. So we have, of course, a very good infrastructure in place. So everywhere there is for fiber class connections and data centers, but the integration between on-premise and cloud is pretty good at the moment. So we not have a lot of latency. Only we run into the issues with CRM Online, especially for performance. So plug-in timeouts, and that are more issues that we run into with integration, especially if it's tied with internal processes of CRM Online.
Yeah, excellent. So, so one of the questions that someone had asked, Matthias had asked, is it would suggest setting up the local database.
Common scenarios, at least for me, are still that we use CRM Online. It's going up a little, but still all the ERP systems are still on-premise, and often the customer prefers to have Scribe also on-premise. So,
excellent.
So we have I think a bit different scenarios here.
Sure. Thanks. So one question, Alex, that someone was saying, I think in response to one of your suggestions was, so you're suggesting to set up a local database in Azure next to the CRM Online data center, that you're going to, if you can get into the kind of the data center, so to speak, you're going to have a better performance.
Sure. Yep. And you would. So that would be one option to set up a VM in Azure, and then set up an Azure SQL database, or a local, or actually install SQL Server. Our preference has been to actually spin up an Azure database, where then Microsoft manages SQL Server for us, and then we simply scale the database with however much CPU or performance we need. That seems to be the easier path. We have done scenarios like that for integrations, where we need to integrate CRM Online with another cloud application. But before sending the data or consuming the data, we needed to crunch the data. It has been a really good fit for this type of architecture.
Excellent. One of the last one that I had on here was, because we have a local SQL, and it kind of goes back to some of our stuff, like you're saying, when you're kind of crunching the data or fixing the data, you run a lot of times pre-process. One of the things in an integration is, we call it pre-processing, and it's really a SQL operation of being able to query the data and join in parts of that kind of information from either external tables or in the case where you had CRM on-premise, the CRM database query directly as part of that data. And so because I'm not having that, I'm able to address that latency issue by being able to get access to these the benefits of having a long-running queries, things that would typically tie up the whole system. But now I can do it because I'm, repurposing that data in another format. So one of the other challenges, and this is kind of my last one that we put up on this list, was is this method that comes up all the time when you're on premise. And so if I'm on premise, and I need to spin up something for my folks to train on, or I need to do user acceptance testing. I don't have, and so if you're on premise, what you can do is you can take your SQL database for CRM, go through the CRM wizard to set up a brand new system and point to a copy of my production database, and effectively the system will just effectively make a copy of my production system. Now I have a training environment spun up, and we can do that for our developers and for other environments to keep them synchronized, so to speak, or make a snapshot copy of my system. And because I don't have access to the SQL backend anymore to restore backups into test and training environments, what are some of the methods that folks are using to keep these, let's say, just as simple as a production and a training environment synchronized? What are some of the ways you guys have seen us manage those kind of systems or challenges?
Yeah. So what we're seeing more and more, especially in the healthcare industry, the banking industry, are folks that not only need a QA environment or a development test environment, but they want the data to be there to be sanitized. So they want data that feels like it's production data, but sanitized. Maybe SSNs are wiped, the address line 1 is randomized, zip codes are random 5-digit numbers. And it's one of the items we can do with Scribe. Not only populate the data in these dev test systems, but create the rules that would sanitize the data. And it's pretty big, especially in the healthcare arena, that we're dealing with a lot of PII information, etc.
Yeah, the personally identifiable information. Yeah, we have a blog article. I've done this many times, setting up proof of concepts, and like you say, in certain industries, health and human services and government agencies, this is a huge deal. Any personally identifiable information needs to have that kind of magic touch, if you will. So there's lots of different strategies. So I do have a blog article out on the Scribe website just specifically that talks about some ways to use different formulas to do that, and then keep all the referential integrity with all that randomized data in place, so I can parent-child things properly. Yep. One of the things that we're seeing more and more of is using Scribe Online to synchronize the actual application data between different systems. So I can take a CRM that is my production environment and point the integration to a copy of that system, and then it will just keep the data, from production into my test environment, keep moving that data over there during an ongoing basis. So my test environments or my online environments are kind of synchronized between one another. So this becomes a way to do that. So one can use Scribe online for that process, or on-premise for that same process. I just got an internal notification this week, so I don't know if we've even announced it out to the public, but we're about to release it's going through testing right now, a CRM to CRM set of templates, or we call them maps, that does this. So you will have effectively a starting starting project, if you will, that would already have a set of here's all of the maps that you're going to need to make an email to email kind of synchronization work. So it's we're excited about seeing that. I don't know if anybody has any other questions there, Alex. I don't know if I see any.
Yes, we may have missed one here from Doug.
Okay.
So they're using an RS subscriber application. Everything's working great, except they use the marketing list heavily. And they need some way of tracking contacts that are removed from a marketing list. Has anybody created JavaScript or a flag to track removals on a local SQL? So the answer is yes. I believe we do have a client that's actually doing the same thing. Now, in their case, because of their existing data lines, they replicate once a day, which is now not the norm. Most of our clients replicate much more often than that. This particular client replicates once a day. Now, they wrote their own set of SQL scripts that, before the replication kicks in, they create a copy of a couple tables, and then using SQL, they compare, hey, what are the users that are now not in this marketing list? And then they add that to another external database. They have their own marketing system. But yeah, so that is doable SQL. It's not super tricky SQL, but it is something that you need to architect, since you have to, again, create a copy of a table. You want to make sure you have enough room, but it's SQL, so it's super quick, even if you do have a lot of data. So yeah, definitely doable, and we have at least one client that I'm aware of doing this.
One thing I should also say is that when we're using Scribe Online replication services, when data is deleted from a table, it keeps track of the deletion by changing a flag on the row of data. It doesn't actually delete it from the table. It says it puts a deletion flag on the data. So marketing list memberships, when they're deleted, would still show in the database, but you should be able to query also for ones that are that have D in the deletion flag. So you should be able to find ones where, like for example, when someone's deleted, a record is deleted from CRM, a contact record or something on that order, it doesn't actually delete it from the replication database. It just flips a switch on the actual record itself to say this has been deleted now. So you can actually query for deletes, is what I'm trying to say on that. So this is kind of cool. Because how can you otherwise how could you query for something that's not in any longer, right? That's one of the challenges with CRM as a platform, right? If once it's deleted, it's gone, baby.
It's gone.
It's gone. You're not going to see it anymore. Well, that comes to the end of our conversation today. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time. Alex, it's just been a pleasure. And Sandor, thank you so much for taking the time today, you guys. I know you guys are super busy, and it's been excellent. I've learned a lot, and I hope our audience has too. We've got a pretty big group out there today. So again, you're talking to the guys that have been doing a lot of integrations. And so if you've got any other questions, you feel free to reach out to us through our thing. And thank you so much for your time today. And thank you to MS Dynamics World for hosting our session. Hopefully it was helpful for everybody.
Yeah. Thanks so much, guys.
Okay. Thanks.